So there's more data than ever. There's many reasons for this. That we have banking, online banking, which is becoming common. And you're going to ask me, don't we have banking already? Isn't there plenty of banking already going on? Well, you see, what you don't understand is these data centers, they take cooling. A lot of cooling needs to happen here, and so that requires water, and electricity. So, these things make a lot of noise. They're noisy, there must be good reasons for having these things, there's more data than ever. There's data, it's floating around, yeah, all of our cell phones, already work and everything, but, the thing is, it takes cooling, and that's going to take resources, that's going to take water, that's going to take electricity. It's, rural communities. There's a lot of talk about rural communities, and, what's the data for, is what everybody always asks me. I'm a professional, I'm an expert on this, and people ask me, what do we need the data, don't we already have data, Remember when we had 4G and everything worked fine, and then all of a sudden we needed 5G? Data is important, guys. We need the centers for them. And, data gets hot. It's hot. You got to have cooling. You need to bring in water. You need to bring in power. It takes a lot of power for this data. We need data for all kinds of stuff. We're going to have, AI takes data, even though we already are doing that on our, every time we do a Google search. And then we got, online banking. We got banking, apps take data, and debt from one, lender to another. Who's gonna carry the data? And then we got there's other stuff. There's plenty of other stuff. There's plenty of other reasons that you would use data. It's just it's just data. It's, at the end of the day, it's data, and we need centers for it. We have centers for all kinds of stuff. We got learning centers. We got centers for disease control. We got all kinds of centers. So the data center thing's been blown out of proportion. There's a lot of talk about data centers, but at the end of the day, they're just centers like anything else. They're just okay. So think of it this way: your computer takes data, your phone takes data. Amazon, and you're gonna say, "Oh, we're fine. We have everything we need. We don't need any more data. Everything's working fine." Okay, well, think about this. How can they sell products to you if they don't know who you are? You gotta make yourself known to these data centers. You're not making yourself known enough. The unexamined self is, the self not worth selfing at the end of the day. So just support these data centers. We need to support these data centers at all costs, because subscription plans. You got to have more subscription plans. Whatever it is, you got to go down there and you got to get on a monthly payment plan. Monthly payment, you like monthly payments. We all like monthly payment plans, once you get over 200 different monthly payments, you're going to need a data center for that. You got to get a data center. And what's going to happen after you get your data center? Well, you need cooling for that data center because it gets hot. You know, you got a lot of payments coming through this thing. You know, you got Netflix, you got Hulu, you got, you know, I don't know, hormone replacement therapy. You know, you got all kinds of, you know, payments every month. You're going to be making these payments. And, you know, that gets hot. We don't have enough data. We just don't have enough. You know, there's some things in life, you know, are free. Data is not one of them. You know, data is one of the few best things in life that isn't free. And, you know, we need centers for that. We need cooling. We need power. We need water. We need, you know, engineers. We need generators. We need, you know, Elon and Eddie Musk to set this stuff up for us because we need more data. Problem is we don't have enough data.